Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to start with this. What is culture and why is it so important for marketers to understand what it is?
Oh yeah. So culture is as one of the founding fathers of sociology would say, Emil Durkheim, that culture is the system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do. It's an organizing operating system that ultimately influences just about everything that we do as humans. And that's important for marketers because our job is to influence behavior. And there is no external force more influential in human behavior than culture, full stop. And those who understand it are more inclined to influence people, and those who do not are more inclined to be influenced by those who do.
How do brands influence culture, or conversely, how does culture influence brands?
Oh yeah. They're constantly always in discourse. When you launch something, when you put some content in the world, a new campaign, a new product, it is being negotiated and constructed based on the discourse that's happening, right? So, you know, I don't know, say you launched a new carrot brand when there was an E. coli breakout of carrots. Like that's not going to go well for you. You are being negatively impacted because of what's happening in the cultural zeitgeist, right? So marketing is always in discourse with culture. So because we are in discourse always with culture, we're in discussion, we're in dialogue. The idea then is that to influence and impact culture is to contribute to the discourse in a meaningful way. I talk about in my book that, an example or a metaphor that my friend Eric Holgren says is that it's like a car. You can drive it where you lead it, you contribute new ideas, new conventions to culture, or you can ride shotgun where you engage in the conventions that already exist. Or conversely, you can suck tailpipe. And that's where you're just basically following whatever is happening with no point of view, no clear conviction. You're just following. You've seen this when this summer where people were like, "My pizza is brat." You're like, "Oh man, it was a lot of fun until you said that." The minute you said it, it's no longer interesting. And these are the ways in which we can engage in culture. We can drive it, lead it, ride shotgun, participate in it, or we can follow it. The brands that lead culture, that contribute new artifacts, new language, new behavior through their cultural works, through their production, these are the brands that are most likely to win as opposed to those who follow.
Are there any I hear this and a lot of people hate it, authenticity, right? You have to be authentic. Like you said, just saying I'm a brat, jumping in on that. Are there any sort of best practices or, how do we navigate that?
Sure. We think about authenticity. Authenticity, there's a scholar named David Brown Jr. who talks about authenticity being one's truest self despite the context. Right. So when I see JK at the store, it's the same JK I see on the street, same JK I see at the gym, same JK I see at work. Right. He is who he is consistently despite the context. And the same thing goes with brands. Brands are authentic when they are being their truest self despite the context, despite who they're with, where you find them. They show up the same. And when brands want to engage in culture, engage in the discourse that happens through social actors, through people, it's the ones that are most like themselves that are awarded the level of credence that helps them engage in culture in a meaningful way. If JK acts one way at the gym than he does when he's at the bar, I go, dude, I don't know who you are. Who are you? You're always different, right? And even though there are certain expectations of how we act at the gym versus how we act at the bar, being one's truest self, despite those expectations, is how we award people with the moniker of being authentic. And I would arguably say that it is inexorbitantly difficult, one would say impossible, to engage in culture sustainably, to contribute to culture sustainably if you are known to be inauthentic.
I wanted to touch on this because I thought it was interesting in the book where you talk about I think this is a great example of tapping into culture, the Bud Light and the What's Up
Yeah.
uh spot where, like, JK and I are of a certain age and we understand that, like,
Mhm.
but, I just think that's a great example. Can you explain that a little bit about how that why that worked
Yeah,
and how
so
they tapped into culture to make that work?
that's right. So Budweiser essentially identified some cultural production in the form of a short film made by a guy named Charles Stone, who was a music video producer who wanted to get into Hollywood. So he made a short film with his friends called True. And the dialogue of this short was essentially the words "was up." And it was a way by which they communicated with each other without having to say more than those words. Was up. And you know, the an executive from DDB, who was the advertising agency for Budweiser at the time, saw the short and said, "That's exactly what we're trying to capture in this brand. Like the ethos of the brand is sort of nuanced and the ability for people to talk to each other without having to say the words because we're so close, because we know each other, because we're so dialed in to the culture. I can just look at you and give a look and you go, I know what's up, right? It's like, my wife and I go to, like, I don't know, like a dinner party, and she looks at me like it's time to go. She doesn't say it. I just know it in the way that she looks at me. That's what was up was for Charles Stone and his buddies. So Budweiser commissioned Charles Stone to essentially uh, rework his short film to become an ad for Budweiser. And what ended up happening is that people who saw themselves in that short film, in that cultural work, they began to use that language as a way to talk to each other. You call a man, they go, "What's up?" And she goes, "What's up?" And instead, this cultural lexicon, this nomenclature becomes a way by which we signify our closeness, right? It's a receipt of our friendship. And in this way, Budweiser identified language that was happening among this group of people. Wasn't new, right? But they took that language or they engaged in that lexicon through these cultural creators as a way to benefit from the equity associated with it. And Budweiser was saying "was up" all the way to the bank, and so was Charles Stone, who was able to find his way into Hollywood to make movies. Everybody who's associated with it won, not because of any changes to the product, but it's the brand's ability to have close proximity to culture.
I want to talk a bit about community because, here at CMI, we talk a lot about how powerful it can be for marketers to build communities for their brands. And you share in the book about the work you did for Beyonce, and you explain that you discovered through that work something I think is really interesting for marketers to understand, that you don't go to build community, you go to facilitate community. So, can you kind of explain this distinction and what it means for marketers who do want to tap into the power of community?
Absolutely. So, in working with Beyonce, what a great privilege that was. Part of my job was to help build her online fan club. So take an offline fan club that typically where people write her letters that will go unresponded like most celebrities, but to build an online fan club where these people were able to engage with each other through their fandom of Beyonce. We realized that the engagement that was happening on a thing that we built, that we were trying to establish, was nowhere close to the kind of engagement that was happening within the community that we would later find that called themselves the Beehive. And these folks had their own language, they had their own vernacular, they had their own artifacts, their own behaviors, and they weren't just fans of Beyonce, but they saw the world the way Beyonce did. Like Beyonce believes in women's empowerment, and they too shared the same conviction. And it was that belief system that brought them together. The music was merely, and I don't say this patronizingly, but the music itself was just the cultural production that expressed the shared belief, the shared that was exchanged among them. And what that illuminated for me is that building a community is that I'm going to bring people and rally them around me and my ideas. When we talk about facilitating community, this is about finding people who already believe what you believe, and you use your resources, your effort, your social capital to help them connect with other people like themselves so that they might collectively achieve the things they set out to achieve together. And what one may see as, wordplay or perhaps hair splitting, I think that it is foundationally, if not philosophically, different in the manner in which you go about it. Because when you're building community, you are the gravitational pull. You are the magnet and you're gravitating everyone towards you. When you're facilitating community, you are trying to facilitate or establish the gravitational pull that brings people together. It's not about you, it's about them. And when we do that, we find ourselves in service of people. I think the best marketing is always in service of people getting their jobs done, their jobs to be done, whether it's the functional job, the emotional job, the social job, or the alchemy of all three of them together.
So it's like, so marketers should be sort of out there looking for these communities that may already exist for
That's right.
their brand or their product or whatever it may be.
That's right. That's right. You find the people who believe what you believe. And that requires the brand being more than a maker of products or the provider of service-based products, right? The idea then is that the brand, these vessels of meaning that we call brand, that they transcend the value proposition, they transcend the category in which they operate, and they end up elevating at an ideological plane. That is, they operate at an ideological plane based on how they see the world. Then they go out and preach the gospel to people who see the world similarly. And they go, yes, totally. I always thought about it that way. Finally, someone said it. And then these people go preach the gospel for you. They go evangelize, creating network effects that bring people towards you. That's the benefit of facilitating community, that you get to benefit from the network effects that come from community. When you're building community, it's you laying bricks, hoping that people show up.
And I think that this can go for B2B and B2C brands, right? It's just finding what that is for that B2B brand.
Absolutely. I mean, B2B and B2C, it's just context, but we're talking about brands. Brands are vessels of meaning. And brands who mean one thing when I'm shopping through the grocery store, uh, have the same mechanisms as brands who mean something when I'm in my cubicle trying to decide whether I'm gonna buy this cloud computing system or that cloud computing system. It all depends on what the brand means to me. You're not saying no one's ever got fired for hiring IBM. That's because within the organization, there is cultural credence, there's trust that the organization has about IBM. And therefore, the cultural social expectations are pushed upon me that even if I see a product that performs better than this IBM product, I'm going to go with IBM because I'm likely to get it through the system easier. No one's going to get upset with me. My boss probably pat me on the back. And I get all the social capital that comes from that, even though a product may be better. Much like I will buy one pair of headphones that we know to be cool when there's another pair of headphones that actually performs better than the cooler pair. But I buy the cooler pair because of what it means and the social capital that comes from that meaning.
Awesome.
I want to shift for a second to politics since
Mm,
it's top of mind and I think important. And you wrote an article before the election about how Vice President Harris was able to tap into the cultural branding to ignite voters. However, it wasn't quite enough. So, are there any lessons we can learn from that? Was there messaging? Like, what have you? What's your thoughts?
sure. I think people will look at the Kamala Harris campaign and say, well, her efforts were not effective enough because she didn't win. And I say, well, no, not really, actually. I would say that she preached the gospel, just like we said, right? Like, start with what do you believe? And people see the world similarly, go, that's my candidate. I think the truth of the matter is this: the country just didn't believe what she believed, right? And to that, you say, well, should she have said something that she didn't believe in an effort to win? Well, we say, well, that's not authentic,
Yeah.
right? It's just like, brands who go to the marketplace and they say, we believe in a thing. The people go, nah, I don't choose you. The brand go, well, we shouldn't have said what we believed. You go, well, no, the people who did choose you are the ones who you should be targeting, right? So the idea here when it comes to the game of politics, it's a binary matter, right? It's a two-party system, which means they're winner. There's one winner and one loser. Full stop. In the marketplace, like you cannot be number one and still win. You could be number five and still be profitable, right? So the marketplace of politics is not like the marketplace of consumption because there's only one winner and one loser. And I would say that for Kamala Harris and anyone going forward in the world of politics, the idea then is that it's not enough just to preach the gospel to the people who see the world the way you do. We have to create the mechanisms or the catalysts by which we're able to ignite the network effects. And perhaps because she only entered the race in July, that she didn't have enough time for those network effects to take hold. And therefore, she was only able to get sort of the first reverberation of the believers. And she didn't get a chance to benefit from their ability to influence other people who were either on the fence or probably weren't even fully aware.
So she basically laid the foundation, maybe perhaps because it was so late that she did do, she proved her authenticity and laid the foundation, but just kind of fell short because she didn't have time to push it out.
I
And,
mean, think of it this way. Uh, she she became the presumptive candidate in July, right? In June, so just like 2 weeks earlier, when people were trying to get Biden out of the seat, they were looking at the long list of potential candidates that they might run, the Democratic Party might run for president. Kamala Harris was at like the bottom of that list, and she's the vice president.
yeah,
No one was checking for her. No one was like, put Kamala in. She should be up there. Like if they were, it was a very minority faction of the party. But in the matter of days, she went from being no way end of list to being gays for Harris, white guys for Harris, white women for Harris, black women. Like
mhm,
the momentum she was able to catalyze in such a short amount of time, unprecedented, unbelievable. I mean, she raised $1 billion
yeah.
in donations. Like that is unreal. What she did was Herculean in the effort. So to sort of poo-poo her campaign was it perfect? No. But was it impactful? 1,000%.
Mhm.
That's a great point.
Yep.
And it got kind of lost, but
I mean,
um,
think how many marketers would love to put
mhm.
their product in the world. 2 weeks earlier, people were like, "It's the worst product on the market," and then the next 2 weeks, people are just in droves
Yeah,
showing up. Like, come on, like, are you kidding me? It's amazing.
it really is. All right, Marcus. So you are super busy teaching and training future marketers every day. What are you focusing on teaching students today, and how is your curriculum evolving, and maybe for the future?
I would say my focus in the past has always been about arming students with a reality that there is a brand of marketing that we teach in classrooms that are very much rooted in the scholarship, which is important, but not terribly contemporary with the clinical. Um, so I've always been about like, let's take the scholarship and marry it with the practice. So you get the academic practitioner gap, is what I've always tried to close in providing sort of an understanding of what it means to actually do it. But over the years to the present day, and which would be sort of the catalyst for the future, that it's not enough just to make them aware of it. You have to change people's perspective. And this is really the cornerstone of all of my pedagogy, that every class I teach, it's all about providing perspective, helping you see the world differently. Because I believe that if we see the world differently, then the world will manifest for us differently. It doesn't matter how much information I provide for you, how much knowledge you have. If you're still seeing the world through the same lenses, you're not fully able to action that knowledge, action that new understanding in a real meaningful way. So my teaching is always about helping people see the world differently, providing perspective.
Do you think these, the younger crop of, students, are they seeing obviously, they're seeing it a little differently, but I'm like, they grew up in a digital age, so their whole perspective, I would seem would to approach it might be a little bit different.
To some degree, I think that like the mechanicals may change, right? So instead of
Mm,
our teachers would yell at us like, "How'd you come to class with no notebook? How'd you come to class with no pen, no paper, sharpen your pencil?" Like these sort of tactical things that were uh, that were the mechanisms at play by which we learned. Those things have been replaced by tablets and computers. But I think that by and large, education is still predicated on the same the same provocation that ultimately we're trying to get people to find themselves in cognitive disequilibrium, that the world that they thought they knew is not
mm,
representative of the world in which they actually reside. And by breaking the schema, we put them in a state of cognitive disequilibrium that they are now forced to put the world back together again, to see the world differently and therefore operate in the world differently. Whether that modality is done through zeros and ones, through analog paper, or some combination of the two, cognitively, we're still playing the same game. And considering the fact that our brains haven't really changed very much since our sub-Saharan African days, we're still operating with the same hardware, and therefore we still leverage the same
mm,
the, the 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 same levers by which we help people learn, help people see the world differently. So while the modality shifts, the core operating way by which we learn is still the same.
mm. Human behavior does not change.
Exactly. Technology is fast, but people change very, very, very slowly.
Well, thank you so much, Marcus, for taking the time to chat with us. Where can people find the book or connect with you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so very grateful. You can find the book everywhere books are sold, thank God. But also, and you can find me across the social web. I go by at Mark to the Sea on all the socials, and you can find me on my website, marktothesea.com.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you
All
so
right.
much,
Mark.
My
Marcus.
pleasure. Thank you. It was a blast.
You taking the time. Thank you.
Always take care. Ciao.